Tonight, the National Day of Prayer goes virtual. How the coronavirus is changing the annual event. Plus,
it's a very unique and unprecedented experience, but there are going to be some bad numbers coming out, and you're going to see a big increase in the unemployment rate.
Unemployment on the rise as America starts to reopen. The latest on how many people are filing jobless claims with the government. And a new presidential order to keep foreign parts out of America's electrical grid. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
The National Day of Prayer moves forward in the midst of the pandemic. Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us. I'm Jenna Browder.
And I'm John Jessup. President Trump met with faith leaders at the White House today to commemorate the National Day of Prayer.
He says prayer now more than ever is needed in our country. CBN White House correspondent Ben Kennedy has the story.
2020's National Day of Prayer looks quite different from years past. COVID-19 shut down public gatherings, schools, and churches. And despite social distancing, the nation still came together to pray.
This year's National Day of Prayer takes on special significance given the fact that it is within the COVID-19 pandemic fight. And it's incredibly important that we remember in our prayers those families who are grieving, those lives that have been lost, and to give special prayers for those first responders and healthcare workers who truly have been the heroes in this fight.
President Harry Truman established the National Day of Prayer back in 1952. Decades later, President Ronald Reagan called it to be held on the first Thursday of May.
The Day of Prayer that was established by President Truman has been a signal to the world and to the nation that we still are believers in God, and that God is creator, God is sustainer of what he has created, and God will bring restoration and peace when we call upon his name. And so this is significant. It was significant then, and it is significant now.
Trump is the 12th president to speak at the annual event, but the first during a pandemic. President Trump said the coronavirus task force is shifting a bit to safety and opening up our country. Does that include reopening churches?
Well, it needs to, and I was very dismayed to see the governor of Illinois, Democrat J.B. Pritzker, make a comment that he wouldn't allow places of worship to have more than 50 people in the short term. That was shocking to see. Reopening our places of worship must be included in reopening our nation. It's imperative.
Ben Kennedy, CBN News.
Thanks, Ben. With this year's Day of Prayer taking place in the middle of the ongoing coronavirus outbreak, today on the 700 Club, National Day of Prayer co-host Will Graham told CBN's Gordon Robertson now is the time people are desperately searching for spiritual answers.
I think this is really a spiritual awakening that's taking place, and people repenting of their sins and coming to Christ looking for spiritual answers. And through that, it brings God glory. And so I think this is very timely, especially for my generation. This is a great time that we can look to the Lord, look for help, spiritual help, and to see if maybe even a great revival take place even now. Even in the midst of tragedy, this pandemic that's going on, I pray that God will use this day to help get our country going in the right direction.
And here now for more is Dion Elmore, Vice President of Marketing for the National Day of Prayer. Dion, it's good to see you. Thank you for joining us today. Big day for you there.
It is. This is the day for us. I mean, we gather all over the country normally on the National Day of Prayer, as was said in the broadcast before. You know, over 60,000 events last year, for example, in-person events. But this year it's a little different. We have some states that have opened up slightly. We have some gatherings that have occurred on limited basis today, but today is actually the National Day of Prayer's national broadcast, and we're praying that God will raise up more prayer and more prayers than ever before.
Indeed. Dion, can you remind us about the purpose behind the National Day of Prayer and the significance it carries now in the midst of a global pandemic?
Sure. You know, the purpose behind the National Day of Prayer is to rally people in the United States, citizens of our nation, to pray for our nation. And in 1952, as it was said, President Truman signed that into law. It was amended in 1988 by President Ronald Reagan that it would be the first Thursday of May. And so we pray every year, and the National Day of Prayer Task Force has rallied thousands upon thousands of events over the decades, gathering people to pray for our nation. And it's especially important, John, right now in the midst of this pandemic, that we gather together, and we're saying it this way, gather together individually in one mind, one heart, and unite together in prayer for our nation. Because as in other times of distress in our nation, we need prayer now more than ever.
Dion, obviously this year is going to look very different than years past, as you mentioned. Talk about what the National Day of Prayer has meant to this country throughout the years.
Well, the National Day of Prayer has actually been going on since 1775. The Continental Congress called for National Days of Prayer, and presidents ever since then have gathered the country together, proclaimed and called out and asked for people to pray on behalf of our nation. And so, that is really the significance that we see is we listen to what the president asks, whoever that president is at the time. They proclaim it, and we respond, and we pray for our nation.
Real quickly here, Dion, can you tell us a little bit more about tonight's event? What can people expect if they tune in?
Sure. Tonight's event is going to be broadcast from many different points. In fact, we're going to be broadcasting some of the segments from there at your station in Washington, D.C. We're going to have points of broadcast from all over the country. Kathy Branzell, the president of the National Day of Prayer, and Will Graham, an evangelist with the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, and also Billy Graham's grandson, Franklin Graham's son. He's going to be our co-host. And we are going to have leaders from all over the nation. Michael W. Smith is going to be leading worship. We will have Rick Warren. We will have Robert Morris. Harry Jackson's going to be joining us. We're going to have Billy Wilson. Of course, Pat Robertson is going to be praying for us. We have many others who are gathering together individually all over the nation, and we're going to bring them together in this one digital platform, and we're going to have that available.
Yeah, quite a lineup. It's a big night. Dion Elmore, we appreciate you taking the time for us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna.
And if you're wondering where you can watch tonight, we have you covered. You can catch the National Day of Prayer event starting at 8 p.m. Eastern. Watch it live on the CBN News Channel, CBNNews.com, on the CBN YouTube page, or the CBN News app.
Well, joining us now is our very own David Brody, Chief Political Analyst. David, as we were just talking about, millions of Americans will be and have been praying today for a swift end to the pandemic, for the country, for its leadership, and specifically for the president. Where does support for President Trump stand among evangelical Christians now? And talk about how that's going to factor at the polls in November.
Yeah, John, look, it's high. It's very high. Remember, the benchmark here is that 81%. We've heard that number time and time again. That's the number of white evangelicals that he won, Donald Trump won in 2016. So everything kind of is measured against that 81%. And honestly, every poll pretty much has come out since his presidency. It's been around that 80% mark, and that's good for Trump. Is it great for Trump? No. He can't rest on his laurels, number one. Number two, 81% because of the vitriol on the left against this president. He's probably going to have to be north of 81%, as we've talked about. And so we wait to see exactly how that plays out. But I got to tell you, it's more like, what have you done for me lately? He's done a lot for evangelicals, but now he's got to get through something called the coronavirus global pandemic. I think you've heard of it, John.
Yeah. So, David, the president, he does talk a lot about how much he's done for evangelicals. You're saying he has to do better in 2020 than he did in 2016 with this base of voters. What can he do? What can he do to, get them out to the polls?
Well, look, I mean, I think he's going to continue to do what worked for him in 2016. He thought that was a winning combination, a winning formula. And I think that's exactly what he's going to do again, which is basically say, look, I'm here for you. I'm fighting for you. And this time he has a bunch of results to prove it. And I think that will be the key. And I think you'll see that in part of their Evangelical for Trump coalition. And of course, there were going to be rallies with that now, or bus tours. And now all of a sudden everything's virtual. So it'll be a challenge. But at the same time, The question really becomes, will evangelicals see this president and vote for this president despite some of the hiccups along the way? Some would say it's worse than hiccups about this administration, what they've done on the coronavirus pandemic.
David, speaking of evangelical support, according to a Pew Research survey, most white evangelicals, about 8 in 10, think President Trump has helped evangelicals and fights for their beliefs, but just 15% said Trump can be described as morally upstanding and 24% said honest. Is that an area where his challenger, the presumptive nominee for the Democrats, Joe Biden, potentially can peel away votes?
Well, I guess on paper, yes. Here's the problem. You know, Barack Obama won 26% of the white evangelical vote in 2008. He won 21% of it in 2012. And the reason he did so, John, he was a great family man, and he had a lot of things going for him in terms of just kind of a better angels candidate, if you will. Joe Biden, last time I checked, he's got a few issues to put out with Tara Reid, number one. And number two, he's gone far to the left on abortion and many other issues. So this is not the Joe Biden that we have seen in the past. Is a reincarnated version, if you will, of Joe Biden, which makes the progressive left very happy, but it might not make him very happy on election night.
David, final question. The Justice Department is asking a judge to drop the charges against former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. Your thoughts on that? About 30 seconds.
Yeah, well, Deep State basically loses. You know, look, Michael Flynn exonerated, flags probably flying at half staff at CNN and MSNBC and all around the country. They thought that the James Clapper and the boys and Comey were above board. And look, lo and behold, what do we have? A handwritten note by the FBI saying, hey, you know what? We're going to set you up, Michael Flynn. And today the Justice Department said, we're not having any of that. They believe, the proponents of Michael Flynn believe justice has prevailed.
All right, David Brody, we've got to leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks.
Coming up, the latest on the coronavirus outbreak in America.
Introducing the CBN Bible from CBN.com. Now, an easier way to study the Bible and grow in your faith. Highlight your favorite verse. Read separate versions at a glance. Click and read a commentary. Or cross-reference your favorite verse using the Strong's Concordance. All the right tools to study the Bible, all in one place. The CBN Bible, available at cbn.com/Bible or the iTunes App Store.
This is CBN Newswatch.
Thanks for joining us.
Watch breaking news, exclusive stories and programs, credible news reporting.
We show you what's happening in the world and how you can pray about it.
This is CBN Newswatch, because truth matters. Weekdays at 5 on the CBN News Channel.
Yes, right on time.
From Superbook.
Pepper's Pizza Palace is donating pizza for everyone today. Wait. I have big plans today.
Trust in God even when times are tough. He has a plan for your life.
Hey, we're gonna be late for the grand opening.
My parents want me to help with this outreach thing, feeding the community. What am I supposed to do here? Superbook!
Join the Superbook Club and get Superbook The Birth of Moses, plus 2 copies to share with others, all for your gift of only $25.
Pharaoh ordered all newborn Hebrew boys thrown into the Nile River, and I have a 3-month-old brother.
The Birth of Moses. Yours for a gift of only $25.
What will you do the next time the soldiers come? I do not know, but I trust God has a plan for all of us.
Superbook Club members, free streaming for seasons 1, 2, and 3 is now available.
Well, welcome back. As expected, jobless claims are still on the rise. The Labor Department's latest figures show around 3.2 million additional people filed unemployment applications last week. In the 7 weeks since the lockdowns went into effect, about 1 in 5 workers have lost their jobs. That translates to about 33 million people seeking jobless benefits over that same period of time. Some economists forecast April's unemployment rate could go as high as 20%. Those numbers will be released tomorrow.
States are easing up on their restrictions. By this weekend, 43 states will have lifted some regulations. But in 19 of those states, cases of COVID-19 are still on the rise. That's leading health experts to warn against reopening too fast.
We are in a critical moment of this fight. Without continued vigilance, we will again create the conditions that led to us being the worst affected country in the world.
The U.S. has seen more than 1.2 million confirmed cases of coronavirus and nearly 74,000 deaths. Meanwhile, only 9 states have enough COVID-19 tests to contain their outbreak and reopen on May 15th. That's according to a new research out today from Harvard and NPR. Alaska, Hawaii, Montana, North Dakota, Oregon, Tennessee, Utah, West Virginia, and Wyoming all have enough kits to test those infected and those who have been in close contact with anyone exposed to the virus. But researchers say all states need to be in contact tracing and isolating those infected for a safe reopening.
And with us now is Dr. Jen Ashton, Chief Medical Editor at ABC News. Dr. Ashton, always great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
33 million people now out of work, so many panicked about where their next meals are coming from and how to pay their bills. It's part of what's driving the rush to reopen the country. How concerned are you about states, counties, and other jurisdictions reopening, even as the number of cases are still rising? And how do you balance those two competing interests?
Well, luckily I have the luxury of staying in my lane, which is only as a doctor thinking of people's health, because this is a complicated issue, and the ripple effects of this pandemic, of course, go beyond medicine, health, and life or death. But if you just look at the health issues, in talking to top epidemiologists and public health officials, infectious disease specialists, the concern is that I think people need to remember this virus has not gone away. We have to learn how to live with it safely and lower risk to an acceptable level, as low as possible, knowing that we'll never be able to make it zero, but also with the provisions in place that we can either step on the gas and accelerate if we feel that it's safe to do so, but also step on the brake if we start seeing people's health suffer with cases going up, hospitalizations going up, and deaths going up.
Dr. Ashton, at a mass factory in Arizona earlier this week, President Trump acknowledged there will be more death. What are the best ways to mitigate that, even now as we see new hotspots crop up around the country and with people starting to venture out now with the restrictions being eased?
Well, I think with the same, common sense measures that have been put forth by the Coronavirus Task Force and the CDC, they're not perfect, but right now they're the best we can do to safeguard our individual health and the health of those around us. With this concept of it's not about me, it's about we. So hand hygiene, keeping at least 6 feet of distance whenever possible between people, wearing masks to protect others, because there is such a real threat of asymptomatic transmission. We know that that occurs with this virus, and we know that this virus is good at spreading between people. So until we have a better grasp on the numbers, better options for treatment and prevention, we have to err on the side of caution, and that means proceed slowly and cautiously.
Speaking of caution, as we head into the summer, more people may start to wonder about summer camps. What's your opinion? Is it safe for parents to send their kids to camp without having to fear that they'll get sick?
Oh, I try not to give my opinion, but I am a mom, and I have college student daughter that I'm hoping will be able to go back to college in the fall. So it's similar to a camp environment. I would love to see camps and schools and colleges function almost as small cities, which is protecting the more vulnerable subsets of populations, but also being able to screen, test, track, isolate. I think that may be the only answer going forward, because it can't really be an all or none situation, I believe, from a medical standpoint and a scientific standpoint. Again, this is a marathon, not a sprint, so I think we need to be innovative and creative while being safe to figure out how we can reduce risk as low as possible.
Well, we appreciate your medical perspective and your motherly perspective ahead of Mother's Day. ABC's Dr. Jen Ashton, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
When I came to Regent University, it's like the world opened up. I felt like I needed to advance my career and go back to school. Regent was a perfect fit for me. The Regent professors are world class. You are equipped. The focus of the faculty is on each individual student, whether it's online or in person. You become a part of Regent's family. You carry with you not just the content and the knowledge, but the confidence to understand that we can be significant in the world.
Regent University. Follow your path.
Nigerian Christians
in Iran are routinely arrested.
Happily, Christians continue to suffer.
In times of trial and affliction, you need to know the truth.
One of the fastest growing Christian populations in the world.
Join Wendy Griffith and George Thomas for Christian World News.
Young people are the ones who are open to the gospel.
Powerful stories of suffering and hope that affect all Christians. Watch Christian World News, Saturday at 5 p.m. Get Protect Your Sleep and discover how to improve the quality of your life. A free DVD or booklet from the Christian Broadcasting Network.
If you're not a great sleeper, you can do things to make yourself a great sleeper. If you're already a pretty good sleeper, you can enhance your sleep and be even better.
5 leading experts help remove the obstacles between you and restorative sleep.
When you don't get a restful night's sleep, you wake up with an accumulation of stress.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to CBN.com to get your free DVD or booklet today.
Everything you do better with a good night's sleep.
You'll discover how food affects your sleep, how to put insomnia to rest, explore effective remedies for sleep apnea, and much more in Protect Your Sleep. Wake up to your best life and get Protect Your Sleep today. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to CBN.com to get your free DVD or booklet.
One of President Trump's newest executive orders aims to protect the United States electric grid. The concern is a potential threat from inside the system.
CBN News national security correspondent Eric Phillips joins us now. Eric, can you tell us more about the potential vulnerability?
Well, John and Jenna, we've reported on how an EMP or an electromagnetic pulse could possibly totally disrupt our electrical infrastructure. It could happen from an outside source, such as an adversary setting off a nuclear weapon or a natural solar flare. But this particular executive order concentrates on the actual components of the electric grid and where they come from.
Nothing is more essential to our way of life than electricity. You can't turn on the lights in a hospital. You can't turn on the lights in your home if you don't have electricity.
That's why Curtis Ellis at America First Policies says the executive order President Trump signed is so important. He says right now the U.S. power grid is actually being put together with parts from countries who are not friendly to our interests.
We now know that there is only one U.S. manufacturer of the specialty electrical grade steel that's used in these 500-ton high voltage power transformers that are used throughout our electrical grid. These transformers and a lot of the switching equipment and other equipment that goes into our electrical grid includes software and includes microcircuitry and computer control mechanisms which could be hacked.
While much attention has been paid to so-called EMPs, Ellis says the threat is actually in the system.
In these power transformers, they could be manipulated or commanded to create a surge that would have the same effect of knocking out the entire grid. Instead of attacking our submarines and our aircraft carriers, you could see a blackout over vast parts of the United States. And then a phone call would go to the White House saying, would you like the rest of your country to go dark?
A type of warfare that could be building right before our eyes. The executive order essentially creates a blacklist of companies under control of foreign adversaries like China, from which power grid equipment can no longer be bought. It also establishes a task force to examine where vulnerabilities in the power sector exist. Ellis says the bottom line for this sector is the same as for others.
Incentivize companies to bring the manufacturing and the production of this equipment back to the United States.
And Ellis underscores that just as the pandemic brought life to a standstill here in this country, control over our electric grid could do the same. So part of the executive order calls for threatening parts of the electric grid to be removed as soon as it's possible to do so. Ellis also says that it's a good idea to create the task force for the power sector, but he says other industries also need to follow suit. John and Jenna.
All right, thank you, Eric. A new painting worth millions, not found in an art gallery, but in the most unlikely of places. We'll explain why coming up when Faith Nation returns.
Christians around the world are standing with the Israelis. But why? In CBN's free magazine, Friends of Israel, you'll discover why Christians are supporting the Jewish state, how Israel is fulfilling prophecy as a light to the nations, and ways you can pray for the people of Israel. Israel needs the support of friends like you. Call now or go to cbn.com to get your free copy of Friends of Israel.
Heavenly Father, we do thank you for the work of your Spirit, Lord God, with this movement of getting the Bible,
Yes.
Lord, into public schools.
Watch The Prayer Link, Tuesday nights at 6:30.
Hey, if you're tired and exhausted all day, you can't think clearly, and you really just need a cup or even a pot of coffee to get through your day, then join me, Dr. Josh Axe, for this new series where I'm going to teach you how to transform your diet and use essential oils and supplements to get a better night's sleep.
Get Protect Your Sleep and live your best life with innovative information from 5 leading sleep experts.
If you're not a great sleeper, you can do things to make yourself a great sleeper. If you're already a pretty good sleeper, you can enhance your sleep and be even better.
Discover a sleep-enhancing bedtime routine, how to put insomnia to rest, learn how to relieve pain that disturbs sleep, and much more in Protect Your Sleep.
Everything you do better with a good night's sleep.
Wake up to your best life. Call 1-800-700-7000 to get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Don't miss out on this brand new series.
Welcome back. Just a quick reminder to tune in tonight for this year's National Day of Prayer event. Coverage goes from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern. You can watch live on the CBN News Channel, CBNnews.com, the CBN News app, or the CBN YouTube page. And finally tonight, the works of mysterious artist Banksy sells for millions, but his newest work won't be displayed in top museums.
Instead, Jenna, it's hanging on the wall of a British hospital right where the elusive English artist left it. The mostly black and white painting came with a note of thanks for those fighting on the front lines of the pandemic. It depicts a boy playing with a doll dressed in a nurse's uniform rather than his superhero toys discarded in a trash can nearby. The painting, called Game Changer, will hang in the hospital until the UK lockdown ends. And then, Jenna, it'll be auctioned off for charity.
Yeah. So how did he do that and not get noticed? We still don't know who Banksy is after all these years.
Thanks for watching.
Have a good evening.